Hey, what's up everybody? So in this video, we're going to be installing a Victron Multiplus 2X120. That's the 50 amp service for the Victron Multiplus. And we're doing that on our 2024 Avenue Alliance 37 MBR. So for those unfamiliar with the Multiplus 2X120, what's going to happen is we're going to take the 50 amp service from the back of the RV that runs to the mid bunk where it connects to the breaker. We're going to be disconnecting that 50 amp connection, that cable, from the mid bunk breaker and pulling that exact wire back to the front compartment here of the RV. We're going to install the Multiplus here and run a brand new 50 amp cable service from the Multiplus back into the mid bunk. So the 50 amp service will pass through the Multiplus. That means that once we're on inverting power from battery, we can power the entire RV. Well, we can power any component of the RV up to the rated capacity of the Multiplus, which is 2500 continuous, 5500 watts of peak power. But anyways, we're going to be doing this step by step on the 37 MBR. We're also going to be installing the Vicron Multiplus, the Servo GX, the MPPT charge controller, Servo GX, the Touch 70, some solar panels, some batteries, and a few other components. I'm not covering all of the details like how to crimp wires, where the wires go. There's plenty of videos online to show you how to do that. This is going to show you the steps of how to do this on the 37 MBR. Also, I've never done this before. This was a brand new project for me. So if I feel confident doing this, then I think that anybody can do it. We're going to go ahead and get started. And if we have any issues, I will let you know what issues I run into and how to work around them. Hopefully, it should be a fairly straightforward project though. Let's get started.
So before we get into the actual installation, let's take a look at the parts and supplies that I used for my installation. Of course, you might choose different vendors, different parts, but I'm going to show you what I installed and what it cost me. So let's start with the actual products we used for the supplies, the equipment. So one of the most important things that I benefited from for a very low cost was on the Explorers.live website. There are some tremendously detailed diagrams that show you exactly how to wire up your off-grid system. So the one that I have here, this is a link to the 50 amp 24 volt towable RV system, and you probably get 4 or 5 different diagrams in there. It was very helpful for me. So I highly recommend using these diagrams. Next is the Victron Multiplus. It's the brain of the whole operation. It's what powers everything. The solar charge controllers. So not only do you need to think about what size controller you need based upon your panel configuration, but on the Explorers.live website, there is an MPPT calculator that will help you to determine what size calculator you actually will need to buy. The Servo GX is really the computer that helps to bring everything together and gives you all the visual controls that you can see from your phone, on the screen inside the RV, even remotely from the internet if you have internet connection connected to your servo. So, and then the touch comes in a 5-inch and a 7-inch screen. So I opted for the 7-inch screen, so you could save a few bucks and maybe get the 5, but I chose the 70. Next is the 24 volt to 12 volt converter. Since we are building a 24 volt system, you need to convert that down to 12 volts for the factory. The RV itself is 12 volts. So the lights, the jacks, the slides all run on 12 volts. And I did test, I can run the 12 volt system just off of the Orion without the need for a 12 volt battery. Finally, we have our links distributor. This is where all of the DC connections come in together and distribute from there. And actually, this is not the last thing. There's a smart shunt. This is what measures the inputs, outputs from the DC connections, and of course, our batteries. So I bought 4 100 amp hour 12 volt batteries. I happened to find an outstanding deal on these particular batteries that were on Amazon Prime Day, and they were $169 each. They're now at $240 or something. I forget the exact price, but they've gone up in price. But Amazon Prime Day had a remarkable deal. Also, these were the smallest batteries I could find. 3 of these fit perfectly inside of the factory battery compartment, and then just one sitting off to the side. So total for this section is around $3,000. Now we go into the actual supplies to install everything. So the first and most important thing is the wire gauge. So for this particular system on 24 volt, we could use 1/0 wire, but whenever I was on Amazon, they had a sale. The Amazon price for this wire that I have linked here, the 2 wire was the exact same price as the 1/0 wire because it was on sale. So it was a no-brainer. I chose the 2 wire because it was the same price. Then you're going to need lugs. You're going to need various sizes of lugs. The most common lug you're going to need is for your battery connection wire. So if you go 1/0 or 2/0, get at least 30 of those with M8 size connectors. Then you're going to need to run some 6-gauge wire for things like your Multiplus, for your charge controller, your Orion, and a few other things maybe. I actually had enough leftover wire from the 50 amp wire that I was able to use the excess wires from that, which are 6-gauge, for the purposes of hooking up everything. Then we have the Victron VE Direct. These are cables. They come in different lengths. So these are the shortest ones they have was 3 foot. These connect the MPPT charge controller to the Servo GX and connect the Smart Shunt to the Servo GX. 20-foot HDMI and 20-foot USB extensions to connect from the Servo GX to our touchscreen in the RV. 3/4 inch conduit. This is for whenever we run the 50 amp service into the front compartment of the RV. We want it protected, so the 3/4 inch was exactly what we needed. Actually, I only needed 10 feet, but the shortest length I could find was 25. Battery tie down straps, because one of the batteries sits outside of the battery box. I bought a battery tie to tie that one down. And then battery disconnect, so self-explanatory. And then a bunch of fuses. You need mega fuses for the distributor. So we need 250 amp for the Multiplus, 250 for the battery bank. And then we need 60 amp fuses for the MPPT charge controller and the Orion. And then we need a 200, it should say 200 amp battery fuse. That's typo there. But this is what's going to go on the actual battery itself. So subtotal here is 302. And then finally, we have stuff that you might already have, like screws and zip ties, Ethernet cables, crimping tool, spray foam. These are things you might already have. Now, in hindsight, if I was doing this, I actually used the screws from my garage, but I would have gone and bought black screws so that it was nice and pretty, but it worked. And then the battery crimping tool that I have here, I bought on Amazon, and it worked perfectly, except the only frustrating thing was it was in metric. The little connectors are metric rather than American wire gauge. So whenever I was, for instance, running the 2/0 connector, I had to figure out that 70 mil was a 2/0 wire. Not a big deal, but it worked fine. And then finally, there's an optional thing. If you want the lights on the distributor to work, there's a hack for it, because surprisingly, the lights only work if you buy the Lynx shunt, which costs 3 times more than the Smart Shunt. But there is a connection that you can create, which I'll show, to make you enable those lights to power up from the distributor itself. So then total cost of this project for the materials, parts, everything. So right at $3388 before taxes. So that's what you're looking at as far as materials. Also, I went to Home Depot and I got some 50 amp wire. So add that into the mix. I think I spent maybe $80 on the wire. So let's round this up to $34.50 for all of the materials and the 50 amp wire.
So I am currently at the step now where I am rerouting the 50 amp service that used to come into the breaker box, the shore power. I've rerouted that to the front compartment, and I'm going to show you how I did that. So first and foremost, the easy part, just take this drawer out, unscrew the breaker from the wall, and then you have pretty easy access to just unscrew the 50 amp that used to be here, and then unscrew this cap here. remove any wires that are connected to the neutral and ground bar, and then just basically pull the wire out. And then from there, it's pretty easy to get the wire pulled from the basement area. So here we are in the basement, and all I did is I removed this section here, which is basically just 4 screws, and that gave me very good access into the. So here's the basement area here, and once you're in this area, you can see where all the wires run, and from here they just go down into the underbelly. So I took the Romex, the 50 amp Romex, which ran down into this little hole, and then I took the body, the liner off of the body, underneath, whatever this thing is called. So I just dropped this whole thing, which is pretty simple. There's 2 support bars here, one, and then there's one in the front. So take off the support bars, and then just go around and take off all of the screws. There's no screws on the front, just the sides, and it's maybe 8 screws that hold this thing up. Once you got this off, you can see right in here, this little square. This is where the wires run, and so I was able to just reach under there with my hand, pull the 50 amp, and then it runs to the driver's side, and I'll show you what I did from there. So here I am on the driver's side, and you can see this is the factory 50 amp right here. So once I had this, it was pretty simple. I just run it the same way as the wires that are already heading in toward the front compartment. And then to get it through the front compartment, I'll show you what I did. So we're no longer going to be needing the inverter prep. So I just removed this conduit that was there, and I'm going to eventually be removing this box here. But basically, once I removed the conduit runs to this opening here. And once I removed that conduit, it was almost the same size as the 50 amp service. In fact, a little bit larger. So you can see this is the conduit that was there. And so I just ran the 50 amp into that same area. And I'm going to come with some more spray foam, and I'm going to foam it up so that it's nice and tight. And then I'm going to tie this down so that it's nice and pretty. But basically, you can see this is the factory 50 amp service, and it runs all the way to the front compartment, no problems whatsoever. Next, I ran this wire. It's my new 50 amp, and I used the same approach. So I just pulled a little hole into this side of the outlet, and then I basically just ran along the same path. So from there into that hole, ran it through here, got in there, and then finally, excuse me, out through there. So that's how I rerouted the 50 amp. So I finished pulling back the inverter wires, the original ones. I probably could have traced them back to the breaker that they go to and completely removed that breaker, but I noticed that it goes back to a distribution box in the basement. Didn't want to mess with that. So I just basically took the 2 original wires that were the inverter wires going to the front compartment, and I just brought them back to the fuse box area and put the caps back on them. As you can see, I've also got the new 50 amp service installed. So officially now the 50 amp service has been rerouted and the inverter has been removed. All right, so the next step is to remove the converter, since the Multiplus is going to have our converter and it's 24 volt. This converter here, the factory converter, is no longer needed. In fact, it has to be disconnected. So this is pretty simple. There was the ground wire, the neutral wire, and then there was a positive wire going into this terminal here. And then there is one last wire that I have here just to show you. So it's the second 15 amp breaker here. This is where the converter connects. In fact, even on the panel here, it shows you that's the converter. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove this wire. I'm going to tape all these wires back, put this back in place, but this will be no longer used. So this will be completely disconnected, and we'll be converting from the Multiplus from now on. Okay, so don't do what I did and close up your entire underbelly and then realize you forgot to run your HDMI and USB extensions for the Servo GX. What I did, as you can see, I've already started installing equipment there, but then I realized, oh no, I forgot my HDMI and USB. So I just temporarily have the Servo GX with the extensions for the HDMI and USB that I'm going to use. Make sure that they run the length and still power the unit. So I just have them temporarily connected to the old battery, and you can see that my screen does in fact work. So I know that the 20-foot extensions on USB and HDMI will work after I run the wires. So I've got it temporarily done, but as you can see, I've already cleaned up the underbelly. Now I've got to take it all back down again and run the wire. So I'm running the HDMI and USB, and so I just used this compartment here because it's much larger to work with, but I drilled the hole for it off to the side. I wasn't about to risk putting a hole right in the middle of all these wires here to center it to make it look visually aligned, because I didn't want to take the chance of nicking one of these wires, or even worse, cutting it, because that would be a disaster. So what I did is I drilled the hole there, used this hole to fish the wires, and then down below the steps I created a hole there, and I'm going to run it between the grates where the barbecue pit is. I wasn't about to try and fish it through the wall the way that those wires go, because it's a very, very tight bend, especially around the drawer in the mid bunk. So that's not an option that I was going to explore. So I got the wire run here, and let's finish this job. So now I've got the cables running through the proper hole. I've got the wires taped so that they don't come off inside the wall. And then I also have the ferrite core that came with the screen. It's a Servo GX, so the ferrite core is here. One goes here, one goes on the GX side. So we're gonna go ahead and put the screen on and finish running the wires. And here's a pretty nice benefit that I just realized. So the cord is just long enough to reach down under the step. So if ever I have to replace the screen, all I have to do is undo the tape from here, pull the screen out, and put a new one in. So very easy access to the HDMI USB connections here in case you ever have to replace it. So with the barbecue pit or the grill removed, we have easy access to this little corner here. And so you can see I've taken the wires from where we ran it just now, and then from here they go straight into the mid bunk, easy access. And so you can see here I got the wires running, and here they are in the mid bunk, and then we're going to pass them through the compartment, and then following the same path we took for the 50 amp white wire, which is the new wire that we ran along the passenger side of the RV. All right, so here we have it. We have power. So I'll show you what I got right now. So we ran our HDMI and USB along the same route as our 50 amp service here and into the coach. I'm gonna put conduit on the 50 amp, so don't worry about that. I just haven't arrived yet, it'll be here. But it goes into the same hole, and then through here, it's gonna run up this beam here into my servo. So now that it's all working, I can finally go ahead and clean up all my wires and close up the underbelly. Well, once I get the conduit for the 50 amp, but that should be in an hour or so. One last tip: make sure you run enough wire back into the RV so that you can access this for future, in case you have to replace it. So make sure you don't pull this all the way too tight. So we're just going to leave this basically setting nice and neat under there. I also ran a little bit of slack in the front, which was 20-foot extensions on USB and HDMI, which was perfect. So 20-foot HDMI, 20-foot USB extensions. While you're running the USB and HDMI, it might be a good time, if you haven't already done so, install some side cameras on each side of the RV. These are very handy for commuting, seeing what's on the passenger and driver side, and then I'll show you what I have on the back. But since you're already down here, these wires here, they just run through the same area as the HDMI USB, and then up here into the compartment where I have the propane tank, which is currently not in. And so these are the wires just bundled up. Just drilled a hole right in here. But basically the running of the wires is the same as the HDMI and USB. So while you're here, 2 for 1. And then up in the top I have the other 2 cameras here. One that points straight down so I can see just right in back of what's in the RV. The other one points up to look more at a street view of cars behind me. but both of these have great range, so I can use them when I'm driving. And then while you already have all of this opened up, you're going to see that the camera here has a switch. So what you need to do is just run the new wire that you're going to run for the side camera. So run one wire here to this switch, and then run from left to right the other connection for the other side. The back is already pre-wired, so nothing is needed in the back. Just one wire from this switch to one side of the RV, and then from the passenger side to the driver's side. So the conduit is run, and I've actually connected the 50 amp service to the Multiplus. So this is 3/4 inch conduit, and basically I just ran it into the underbelly, and I stopped it right where the 50 amp connects through the metal joist. Past that, there's no other points of contact with metal that could possibly create a short. So it's just basically another, I don't know, 5 inches past the hole that it runs past. And we got the 50 amp service connected. There's a YouTube video showing you how to do this type of connection, which is basically you create two 90-degree bends, and this wires become fairly easy to connect. So I'll post a link to that video showing you how to easily get these 50 amp service connected. So let's take a look at the batteries. So as you can see, I bought these specific batteries here. I looked at different sizes. These were the ones that seemed like they would fit the best. So 3 of them fit nice and neat inside of the existing battery compartment. So nice and tight. What I've done is I've created a hole in the back side there, and I've just run the new wires in. And so I'm running this as 24-volt battery. So I have one of the terminals going to the back there with a 200 amp fuse. And then I've got them wired. So 3 batteries sit in this box here. And then up at the top there, I've got another hole where I'm going to connect to the 4th battery. So this is the compartment that is right next to the battery, or the space that's right next to the battery compartment. So what I've done, I have taken screws and screwed this strap down the exact width of the battery. So we're going to tie our 4th battery here right next to the battery compartment so that it stays put and it won't move. All right, so here's the final product with our 4th battery sitting here and tied down for security. We have the battery connected into our compartment here. Just for optics, I will put this vent back on, but lithium batteries don't really need that, but I'll just do it anyway. So batteries are done. Next, we're going to connect this to our distributor. Okay, so it is moment of truth time. So everything is wired, hooked up. So we're going to go through and do a quick walkthrough of what we've done. So first, starting with the 50 amp service. So this is our existing 50 amp service that was running to the breaker box that we ran to the front, and then our new breaker, our new 50 amp that runs to the breaker now. And as you can see, I've installed the conduit. Next, from the Multiplus, we have the positive negative, which runs here to the distributor. And then additionally, we have the the ground for the Multiplus that runs to the ground for the distributor. Then we have the ground wire here for our MPPT, which connects here to the side. Be sure you don't forget this wire during installation, because it's hard to do after it's installed, like I did. Then from the Multiplus, we have our factory positive and negative PV wires. So I just reused the same wires, and I also reused the same disconnect from the factory for the PV positive. Then from the battery positive, battery negative from our MPPT, we come into our distributor. On the back here, you can see we have 2 wires coming in. So one of these wires here was the factory negative wire for the solar. So that one just goes to, this is the chassis wire. This is the chassis wire connecting to the ground for the RV. Next, we have here our Orion 24 volt to 12 volt converter that comes down to here, where I have the 24 volt side plugged up to one end, the 12 volt side that goes to our factory wires. In fact, this is the factory wire, I just retipped it. That goes back to our disconnect switch up here at the top, and then into our terminals. So these were just all reused. I didn't touch any of this. I just repurposed this wire, connected it to our Orion. I do not plan to use a 12-volt battery. I'm just going to use the Orion and see if that is enough power for slides, jacks, and so forth. I got my Servo GX plugged up here with all of my connections. So right now I've got the VE cam for the Multiplus, and then I have two of the VE directs, one for the Multiplus, the other one for the Smart Shunt. And then I have my primary disconnect here. So let's go ahead and turn it on. Okay, we got some lights at the top. That's good. Let me turn on the Multiplus. Okay, I heard a click and I hear lights. That is good. Okay, well those are both good signs. Let's go ahead and turn on everything. Okay, so I hear the Multiplus kicking on for charging. Let's go inside. Okay, so we have some stuff here. I'll figure this out in a minute. We have lights, and let's attempt AC. And we have AC, and we are on shore power. No, we don't have any. I'm sorry, we're on battery, no shore power. So inverter is working, and that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and program the system and clean up the wires, and then I think we're done. Okay, so now I've got everything programmed, got all of the settings correct, and now I can see my entire system's up. So I got shore power coming in, got my battery capacity, DC, the Multiplus, how much I'm using on AC, and how much I'm pulling from solar. It's still morning here, so not getting too much, but I think that this installation is done. So now I just need to clean up and enjoy. So next we need to disconnect the alternator charging, since we are no longer going to be charging with 12-volt power from the 7-way pin, and now we have a 24-volt system, and we're not going to be installing a 12 to 24-volt converter. So therefore we do need to disconnect the 7-way pin from the truck from our 12-volt system. There's actually a tech bulletin on this on Alliance's website. If you were to just Google 7-way pin solar plus, you will find the tech bulletin. Maybe I'll post a link to it in the description here. But basically it's real simple. Attached to the second bar here, there was red and black wires coming out of this conduit here. So all we did is we just cut those wires, we crimped them together and taped them, and we just set it aside here. So now this second pin should have only the black wire coming in from the 7-way pin and nothing going off of it. Okay, so we now have everything is cleaned up, as you can see. We've got our conduits. I need to finish bolting the conduits down, but that's the last thing. Other than that, the two things that I did forget about, that I wasn't too big of a deal, but I did forget to run the Ethernet cable for the VE direct, and I did forget to run the battery temperature sensor before putting the bottom of the Multiplus on, so don't forget about that. But I had to take this down, rerun the wires, clean up again, but no big deal. So if you can remember to do that before you clean up, do that. I did connect the Multiplus battery sensor to the negative on the battery bus, and so that's it. So everything is hooked up, looking good, and it's running good. I'll show you on the inside. Oh, and one more thing. So I did put the vent back onto the battery box. Let's go inside now. So here we have our Multiplus, and I come in here, menu, you can see that I have all of my devices connected. Multiplus, shunt, solar charger, everything's working. So the last step is going to be to put the two panels on the roof. So now moving on to the solar panels. So these are the panels, these are the clips that I bought for it. They're heavy duty, so I wanted something that was going to be very secure. It only came with one screw here, but I did put these small self-tapping screws to give it an extra support, so that way it's going to be 2 onto the roof and 2 onto the panel. So 2 and 2. And there's 1 on each corner. So let's go ahead and put this on the roof and get this done. Okay, so the 2 panels are on the roof now. So I laid the first one right next to the factory panel. So those 2 came from the factory. This one was added. So I just set that one there. It fit nice and easy between this vent and the panel. Second one is between the ACs so that it's not blocked by any of the shadows. So I tied them down with some number 10 wood screws, and then I had some Decamate screws, so I used a little bit of both just for extra security. And so now we're going to wire this thing up. Actually, first we're going to put some die-core Eternabond on these seals and then wire it up. Let's start off by taking a look at how the factory panels are wired. So these are the 2 factory panels, and so right here you can see these are how they're wired. They're just connected in parallel, so black to black, red to red, with the Y connector to each of the wires. So what the benefit of parallel connection is that this will keep your voltages the same and double your amps. So factory, this is just call this 10 amps, 40 volts. So when they're wired in parallel, you're going to have 40 volts, 20 amps, so you're doubling your amps. What we're doing is with the 2 extra panels, we're going to be doing series parallel. So we're going to create 2 panels in a series, and then we're going to connect both of those series together in parallel. And so what we're going to get is we're going to double the volts and double the amps while we're maintaining a nice balance between the 2. So let's go ahead. What we're going to do is we're going to disconnect these wires, and we're going to start connecting the parallel series for our new panels. Okay, so let's take a look at series number 1. This is factory panels. Now they're in series. So here's our positive wire. Notice it only has 1 lead coming from it, and that is the lead from this panel here. The negative of this lead connects to the 20 amp fuse, which connects to the positive to that wire. Then the negative lead from that wire comes into here. So this is basically creating one large circuit, and that is doubling our voltage. So that our voltage now is 40 volts times 2, 80 volts, but our amps stay the same at 10 amps. So this is the first series. We're going to run one more series of our new panels. So we're going to go ahead and just connect these wires here, and this will be series number 1. Okay, so we're done with that. So now we have our second run. So you can see we got positive coming in here, goes into, first of all, we have a fuse, positive wire. Negative wire goes to the positive lead on the second panel. Then there's a fuse on the positive. Then the negative lead goes out, comes back to here. So that's one series. So now we have 2 series. So we're ready to turn this on and see if we got what we expect. So something I forgot to tell you, but didn't forget to do, is before you're messing with the panels on the roof, turn off your MPPT controller disconnect so that it's not under load. So I just finished turning the MPPT back on. As you can see here, I am getting 927 plus or minus watts. It is not quite a full sunny day. It's partly sunny, so I'm not going to get the full 1300 watts of power on my roof. But that shows that it is working as expected. So I'm happy with the result there. So hopefully on a bright sunny day without any clouds and cooler temperature, not 102 degrees, it is brutal right now, this would be even better than 900. So just as a point of reference, this is how the sky looks today. So it is mostly blue, but the sun is going in between clouds. So when I was doing my test, it was bits of sun, bits of slight amounts of haze. But as you can see, I do know a thing or two about solar panels, having had them for several years. I know when it's optimal and when it's not. And today is 101 degrees outside. It is definitely not an optimal day for sun, but I mean for solar, but 73% of total output was a pretty good test for my first run on a day like today. So here is the final product. So we got our 4 panels, room for growth, but not these size panels for sure. I can't put any more of the 320, 330s. There's no more space for this size, but I could definitely put some more smaller ones somewhere here in the future, but good for here for now. So this project is officially done. So farewell. Hope you enjoyed these videos.